Power has a scent. It smells like old money burning in mahogany fireplaces, while lesser men freeze outside gates they will never enter. In London's most exclusive circles, one name stops conversations mid-sentence: Duke Lucien Ashbourne, the man who turned northern wastelands into industrial empires, the predator in tailored wool who crushes rivals before breakfast and signs treaties before dinner. Tonight, beneath crystal chandeliers worth more than entire villages, England's most feared nobleman discovers something terrifying. Betrayal tastes the same whether it comes from enemies or from the woman wearing his ring. Stay until the end. Watch what happens when a monster learns to bleed. Drop your city in the comments and smash that like button because this story breaks every rule you thought romance had to follow. The winter of 1847 carved London into two distinct realities. Inside Mayfair's limestone palaces, aristocrats waltzed through rooms heated by imported coal and lit by enough candles to guide ships through fog. Outside those gilt-edged windows, factory workers huddled in tenements where three families shared beds and shifts, and children coughed black phlegm into rags that served as blankets. Duke Lucien Ashbourne understood both worlds intimately. He built his fortune by recognizing that England's future belonged not to men who inherited crumbling estates, but to those ruthless enough to drag industry into the modern age by its throat. At 32, he controlled textile mills across Yorkshire, steel foundries in Birmingham, and enough parliamentary votes to sink legislation before committees even formed. His wealth exceeded that of minor European kingdoms. His influence made cabinet ministers sweat through silk shirts when he entered government halls. None of that mattered the moment he saw her. The Frost and Fireball occupied Devonshire House on a February night so cold that carriage horses wore blankets beneath their harnesses. Inside, 2,000 guests pretended the ice gathering on windows did not exist, while servants stoked fires large enough to roast oxen. Lucien attended because absence from such events signaled weakness. In aristocratic warfare, visibility equaled power. Let rivals see exactly who controlled the board. He stood near the Eastern Gallery, champagne untouched in his left hand, watching lesser nobles perform the exhausting dance of social hierarchy. Lord Pemberton laughing too loudly at jokes that were not funny. Lady Hartwick displaying her daughters like merchandise at market. The Viscount Weatherby already drunk enough to forget which lies he told which mistresses. Pathetic. Then the music shifted. A waltz began. The crowd parted near the main staircase, and Lucien saw something that made him forget how to breathe. She descended the marble steps alone. No family flanking her. No eager suitors rushing forward to claim her hand. She moved through the ballroom's chaos like stillness given human form. Dark hair gathered simply at her nape, dressed the color of winter storms rather than the pastels other women wore to attract attention. Lady Seraphina Vale. Lucien knew her name only because her younger sister sparkled across London's social circuit like a diamond someone kept shoving beneath noses. But this woman, the elder daughter whom society ignored, she possessed something infinitely more dangerous than beauty. Intelligence that showed in the way she observed rather than performed. He watched her refuse 3 dance invitations with the same polite smile that never reached her eyes. Watched her accept a glass of champagne she did not drink. Watched her position herself near the botanical displays where she could see everything while appearing to examine orchids. Survival tactics. She had learned to make herself invisible in rooms designed for spectacle. Lucien crossed the ballroom without conscious decision. Men stepped aside. Conversations paused. By the time he reached the botanical alcove, a small circle of empty space had formed around them both. Sotsats. Lady Seraphina looked up from a white orchid she had been studying. Her eyes were gray, storm cloud gray, the kind of gray that preceded lightning. "I have not seen you at these events before," Lucien said. The words came out rougher than intended. He was accustomed to boardrooms and parliamentary fights, not drawing-room pleasantries. Seraphina's expression did not change. "I attend many events, Your Grace. Most people simply do not notice." The honesty surprised him. Aristocratic women typically deployed coyness like armor. This woman spoke like someone who stopped expecting softness from the world years ago. "Then they are fools," Lucien replied. Something flickered across her face. Not pleasure at the compliment. Suspicion. As though kindness from powerful men always carried invoices. "You are direct," she observed. Lucien moved closer. Near enough to see gold flecks in those gray eyes. near enough to smell lavender instead of the suffocating rose perfume other women bathed in. I built factories. Lady Seraphina, I do not have time for the games your peers play. And what game do you think I play, Your Grace? Survival. The word landed between them like a blade on marble. Seraphina's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on her champagne glass. Around them, the ball continued. Music swelled. Dancers spun past in blurs of silk and candlelight. But inside their small pocket of space, everything had gone dangerously still. You know nothing about me, she said quietly. Lucien smiled. The expression felt foreign on his face. Unused. I know you are the eldest daughter of a family drowning in debt. I know your father gambled away 3 estates before dying and leaving your mother to manage catastrophe with no tools except the daughters she produced. I know your sister is considered the great beauty while you are considered the great inconvenience. I know you read philosophy when other women read Gothic novels. I know you have been courted by 11 men in the past 4 years and refused every one of them because you recognized they wanted access to your sister, not you. Color drained from Seraphina's face, then returned in a flush of fury so raw it made her beautiful. How dare you? I dare because I pay attention, Lucien said calmly. While London's elite chase your sister like dogs after foxes, I watch the woman intelligent enough to understand that marriage to the wrong man becomes a lifetime sentence with no hope of parole. Seraphina set down her champagne glass. Her hand shook slightly. The tremble should have made her seem weak. Instead, it revealed precisely how much control she was exerting not to throw the crystal at his head. What do you want from me, Your Grace? Lucien had negotiated with railway tycoons and industrial barons. He understood leverage, timing, the exact moment to strike before opponents realized they had already lost. I want you to dance with me. The request was so ordinary after his calculated verbal assault that it clearly disoriented her. Seraphina stared at him like he had switched languages mid-sentence. Why? Because I am curious whether you dance the same way you do everything else, Lucien said, with precision that hides rage. I do not dance. Everyone dances at balls, Lady Seraphina. It is practically the law. Then I am a criminal, Your Grace. Lucien laughed. The sound surprised him as much as it appeared to shock her. When was the last time someone made him genuinely laugh instead of perform the social ritual expected at dinner parties and parliamentary receptions? One dance, he pressed. Consider it penance for my rudeness. Seraphina studied him for a long moment. Those gray eyes dissected him with surgical care, looking for the trap she knew existed somewhere beneath his words. Finally, she extended her hand. Her fingers were cold, despite the ballroom's heat. Lucien led her onto the floor as a new waltz began. Around them, London's elite watched with the kind of hungry interest aristocrats reserved for fresh scandal. The Duke of Ravenmere dancing with the overlooked Vale daughter. Fascinating. As they began to move, Lucien felt Seraphina stiffen in his arms. She danced competently, precisely, exactly as he predicted, but there was no joy in it, no softness. She moved like someone executing a military drill. Relax, he murmured. I am relaxed. You are terrified. Seraphina's eyes snapped to his. Of you? Of what I represent. Lucien turned her beneath his arm. Her dress swirled like storm clouds. When she came back into position, he held her closer than propriety suggested. Let scandals start. He was bored of following rules designed to keep powerful men domesticated. Men like me do not court women like you without purpose, Lady Seraphina. You are correct to be suspicious. Then what is your purpose, Your Grace? To discover whether the woman I have watched for 4 years is as extraordinary as I believe, or merely another disappointment in a city built from them. The music swelled. They turned past Lord and Lady Ashford, past the Marchioness of Thorpe, past Seraphina's own mother who watched from the gallery with calculation sharp enough to draw blood. When the waltz ended, Lucien did not release her immediately. He kept her hand in his for one additional heartbeat, long enough to feel her pulse hammering against his palm. Thank you for the dance, Lady Seraphina. She pulled away, stepped back, drew herself up with the kind of dignity women learn when pride is the only thing they own. Good night, Your Grace. She turned and disappeared into the crowd before he could respond. Lucien watched her go, tracking that dark head through seas of blonde and auburn until she vanished entirely. Around him, whispers began immediately. Did you see the Duke with the veil girl? Not the beautiful one. The other one. How curious. Lucien ignored them all. He had what he wanted, the first move executed. The board set. Now came the part that would either prove him brilliant or destroy everything he built. Ishiawa Matsamwa Mihi. 3 days later, a black carriage bearing the Ashbourne crest arrived at the Vale residence on Grosvenor Square. Inside the crumbling townhouse that still pretended to grandeur, Lady Vivian Vale received the Duke's marriage proposal with the restraint of a woman watching her execution pardon arrive at the gallows. "Your Grace is most generous," she said carefully. They sat in a drawing room where wallpaper peeled at the corners and furniture showed wear no amount of strategic cushion placement could hide. Portraits of dead Vale ancestors watched from walls with the same disappointment they likely carried to their graves. Lucien did not touch the tea service a frightened maid had delivered. "I'm offering £50,000 to settle your debts," he said bluntly. "Another $30,000 as dowry, and a lifetime stipend of $5,000 annually to ensure you maintain appropriate accommodation." Lady Vivian's hands trembled. She clasped them together in her lap. "All very generous indeed, Your Grace, though I confess some surprise at your choice of daughter." There it was. The poison aristocratic mothers learned to inject with smiles. "I am not a man who confuses decoration with value," Lucien replied coldly. "Your younger daughter is beautiful. She is also vapid, easily manipulated, and will produce nothing but expensive tantrums and social scandal. Lady Seraphina possesses intelligence, resilience, and the capacity to serve as Duchess of Ravenmere without collapsing beneath the weight of responsibility. I am not selecting a broodmare, Lady Vale. I am selecting a partner." The rebuke landed perfectly. Lady Vivian's face flushed. "Of course, Your Grace. I only meant to ensure you understood that Seraphina can be quite stubborn, headstrong even." "Good," Lucien said. "I have no use for obedient dolls." Lady Vivian's expression suggested she wanted to argue, but lacked the leverage. Desperation smelled like rotting orchids. Lucien recognized it immediately because he weaponized it constantly in business negotiations. "When might we arrange the formal introduction?" Lady Vivian asked, already mentally spending money she had not yet received. "There will be no courtship," Lucien stated. "I have made my decision. The marriage will occur in 6 weeks. I expect Lady Seraphina to prepare accordingly." Shock cracked Lady Vivian's practiced composure. "Your Grace, surely some time for the young people to become acquainted." "I am not a young person, Lady Vale. I am a man of 32 years who has built an empire through decisiveness. If I waited for the slow crawl of traditional courtship, my competitors would devour my territories while I wasted time at tea parties. 6 weeks. That is my offer. Accept or refuse, but do so now." Lady Vivian looked like a woman holding a live grenade. Accepting meant sacrificing her elder daughter with barely enough time to order wedding clothes. Refusing meant watching creditors auction their remaining possessions while her younger daughter's prospects evaporated alongside the family reputation. She had no choice. They both knew it. "We accept, Your Grace." "With gratitude." Lucien stood. "Excellent. My solicitors will deliver the contracts tomorrow. I expect Lady Seraphina to sign them without incident. And if she refuses?" The question escaped before Lady Vivian could stop it. Lucien paused at the drawing room door. He looked back at this woman who produced children like negotiating chips and wondered briefly what Seraphina's childhood had been like under her supervision. "Then I will destroy what remains of your family with such efficiency that historians will use the Vale collapse as a cautionary tale for the next 2 centuries. Do not test me, Lady Vale. You will not enjoy the results." He left without waiting for response. The carriage ride back to his Mayfair residence took 12 minutes. Lucien spent them staring out the window at London's streets, where merchants hawked goods to servants, and prostitutes negotiated with men in alleyways, and beggars froze slowly in doorways. This city operated on brutal mathematics. Power protected you. Weakness destroyed you. There was no middle ground. He had learned that lesson at 15 when his own father died and left him with crumbling estates and debts that would have broken softer men. Lucien rebuilt everything through calculated ruthlessness. He crushed competitors, absorbed rivals, and expanded his influence until even the Queen's advisors spoke his name with wary respect. Along the way, he became the monster people whispered about at dinner parties. Cold, unfeeling, dangerous. Most of it was performance. Strategic intimidation. But some of it, the parts that woke him at 3 in the morning staring at bedroom ceilings, some of it had grown real. Until he saw Seraphina Vale descending those stairs. and recognized something he thought he had carved out of himself years ago: hope. The wedding was set for March 15th at St. George's, Hanover Square. Lucien spent the intervening weeks managing business interests and ignoring the gossip circulating through London's drawing rooms. Speculation ran wild. Why would the Duke choose the elder Vale daughter? What did he see that others missed? Was this some elaborate business arrangement disguised as marriage? Let them wonder. Lucien cared nothing for their opinions. 2 weeks before the wedding, he sent Seraphina a letter. Not a romantic declaration. A contract. Lady Seraphina, I am not a man given to sentiment or flowery declarations. What follows is truth delivered without decoration. You did not choose this marriage. I imposed it upon you through financial leverage against a family that left you no options. For that, I will not apologize. Survival requires ruthlessness. You understand this better than most. However, I will offer you something rare in aristocratic marriages: honesty. I have watched you for 4 years, not your sister. You. I attended events I despised because you would be there. I positioned myself where I could observe you reading in gardens, walking through museums, refusing suitors with the same polite disdain you gave spoiled fruit at market. I'm fascinated by you, Lady Seraphina, by your intelligence, your resilience, the way you survive in a world designed to crush women like you into decorative silence. I am offering you an escape from your current prison. Ravenmere Hall will be yours to manage. My wealth will be yours to access. My name will be yours to wield. In exchange, I ask for partnership, not submission, not performance. Partnership with a woman strong enough to stand beside a man society considers a monster. If you arrive at St. George's on March 15th, I will interpret that as acceptance. If you do not, I will honor that decision and ensure your family receives sufficient funds to survive without you sacrificing yourself. The choice is yours. Lucien Ashbourne, Duke of Ravenmere. He sent the letter by private courier with instructions to place it directly into Seraphina's hands. No response came. The silence stretched across days. Lucien wondered if he had miscalculated, if offering freedom had revealed weakness she would exploit, if honesty with a woman trained to expect lies had been the catastrophic mistake his business rivals prayed he would make. March 15th arrived with freezing rain that turned London's streets to rivers of mud and ice. Lucien stood at the altar of St. George's, Hanover Square, in darkness, broken only by hundreds of candles. Behind him, 200 of England's most powerful families filled pews, watching with the same hungry interest they gave public executions. The organ began. Doors opened. And Lucien Ashbourne, the man who commanded industrial empires and parliamentary votes, discovered what true fear felt like, because the woman walking toward him beneath layers of ivory lace and inherited pearls was not Lady Seraphina Vale. The veil obscured her face, but Lucien knew bodies the way master carpenters knew wood grain. He recognized posture, movement, the subtle language of how people inhabited their own skin. The woman approaching the altar walked differently, carried herself with the artificial confidence of someone performing a role rather than living it. This was not Seraphina. This was her sister. Horror and fury crashed through Lucien simultaneously, his hands clenched at his sides. Around him, the cathedral filled with organ music and the rustle of silk and the collective breath of England's elite waiting for him to claim his bride. They had switched them. Lady Vivienne Vale had betrayed the agreement and sent the beautiful daughter instead. Probably assumed Lucien would be too proud to expose the deception publicly, too invested in avoiding scandal to reject a different Vale girl at the altar. She had miscalculated catastrophically. The impostor reached the altar, stood beside him. Her hands trembled beneath the lace gloves. The archbishop began the ceremony. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Lucien did not hear the words. His mind raced through options with the same cold precision he applied to destroying business competitors. He could expose the fraud immediately, create the largest scandal London had seen in decades, ruin the Vale family so thoroughly that their name became synonymous with betrayal. He could proceed with the ceremony and annul it afterward, claim deception, drag them through courts until they wished for death. Or the thought arrived like lightning through storm clouds. Or he could use this. The archbishop continued speaking. The impostor beside Lucien shook so violently he could see it through her veil. She knew he knew. terror radiated from her in waves. Lucien made his decision. When the archbishop asked if he took this woman as his wife, Lucien answered clearly, "I do." Gasps rippled through the cathedral, not because he accepted, because his voice carried something that made people's skin crawl, ownership that sounded like a threat. The ceremony concluded. Lucien lifted the veil with movements so controlled they appeared mechanical. The face beneath was beautiful, porcelain skin, blue eyes, perfect features that graced every ballroom in London. Lady Evangeline Vale, not Seraphina. Lucien looked into those terrified blue eyes and smiled. The expression did not reach his own eyes. It did not carry warmth or joy or any emotion that belonged at weddings. It promised consequences. Then he kissed her, hard enough to make it clear this was not affection, this was conquest. When he pulled away, Evangeline looked like she might faint. Lucien turned to face the congregation, his new bride trembling beside him, and recognized the trap he had just escaped. They thought sending the beautiful daughter would appease him, that he would accept the substitution because all aristocratic men wanted the same thing, a decorative wife, a beautiful accessory. They were about to learn how catastrophically they had underestimated him. The reception at Ashbourne House lasted 4 hours. Lucien played his role perfectly. The satisfied Duke, the powerful man who had claimed England's most beautiful debutante as his prize. He danced with Evangeline while photographers captured the moment, accepted congratulations from men whose respect he neither wanted nor needed, watched Lady Vivian Vale drink champagne like water while trying to hide her relief. All the while, one question burned through his mind. Where was Seraphina? At midnight, when the last guest stumbled drunkenly into waiting carriages, Lucien finally cornered his new mother-in-law in the abandoned library. Lady Vivian turned from the window where she had been watching the rain. "Your Grace, I trust everything was satisfactory?" Lucien closed the library door, locked it, moved toward her with the same measured calm that preceded violence. "Where is she?" The color drained from Lady Vivian's face. "I do not understand. Where is Lady Seraphina Vale?" Lady Vivian pressed against the bookshelf. "Your Grace, I can explain." "You sent the wrong daughter to my wedding," Lucien said quietly. "You violated our agreement, committed fraud before God and 200 witnesses, and you genuinely believed I would accept it." "Evangeline is far more beautiful," Lady Vivian stammered. "More suitable for a duke. More—" "I did not ask for a comparison," Lucien interrupted. His voice remained soft, conversational, the kind of tone people use discussing weather. "I asked where Seraphina is." Lady Vivian swallowed hard. "She refused to attend, locked herself in her rooms. We could not force her into the carriage, Your Grace. We had no choice but to—" "You had no choice," Lucien repeated. He laughed. The sound made Lady Vivian flinch. "So you sent a different daughter like changing horses mid-journey. Assumed I would not notice. Assumed I would be satisfied with any Vale girl in a wedding dress. Your Grace, please understand." "I understand perfectly." Lucien moved close enough that Lady Vivian could smell the brandy on his breath. "You are a desperate woman who gambled everything on my pride, preventing me from exposing your fraud. You were wrong." Tears filled Lady Vivian's eyes. "What will you do?" Lucien considered her for a long moment. This pathetic woman who destroyed her daughters through ambition, disguised as maternal care. "Nothing," he said finally. "Tonight." Lady Vivian exhaled shakily. "Thank you, Your Grace. Thank you." "But tomorrow," Lucien continued as though she had not spoken, "my solicitors will begin dismantling what remains of your family reputation. Every debt, every scandal, every secret you buried will surface. Your younger daughter and I will remain married because I refuse to give you the satisfaction of my humiliation. But you, Lady Vale, will spend whatever years you have left watching your family name become a cautionary tale." He unlocked the library door, paused, looked back, and Lady Vivian, "If I discover you harmed Seraphina in any way, I will burn your world to ash. Do you understand?" She nodded, unable to speak. Lucien left her there, returned to the reception hall where his new bride sat alone at the head table, looking like a prisoner awaiting execution. She stood when he approached. "Your Grace, Go upstairs to the Duchess' chambers," Lucien said coldly. "Remain there until morning. I will decide your fate then." Evangeline fled. Lucien poured himself whiskey from the sideboard, drank it in one swallow, poured another. Around him, Ashbourne House settled into silence. Servants cleaned, rain hammered windows. Somewhere upstairs, a woman he did not want wore his ring and wept into expensive pillows. None of it mattered, because the woman Lucien actually wanted was locked somewhere in the Vale residence, and discovering why she refused to attend her own wedding had just become his singular purpose. The Duke of Ravenmere had survived business rivals, political enemies, and industrial sabotage. Now came something infinitely more dangerous, a woman who chose isolation over surrender. And Lucien Ashbourne had just realized that claiming her would require tactics far more sophisticated than wealth or power. It would require something he spent years convincing himself he did not possess: humanity. The question was whether he remembered how to access it before he destroyed everything trying. Dawn broke over London like a wound splitting open. Gray light filtered through rain-streaked windows of Ashbourne House, while somewhere upstairs a woman, who was not supposed to be his wife, pretended to sleep in chambers built for someone else entirely. Lucien had not slept. He sat in his study watching night dissolve into morning, whiskey glass empty beside financial ledgers. He could not focus on reading. His wedding ring felt foreign, heavy, like wearing someone else's skin. The trap had closed perfectly. He married the wrong woman in front of 200 witnesses, while the one he actually wanted remained locked away in her mother's crumbling townhouse, like a prisoner refusing pardon. Most men would accept the substitution. Beautiful wife. Prestigious alliance. The practical mathematics of aristocratic marriage suggested he had won. But Lucien Ashbourne had not spent 15 years building an empire by accepting what other men considered victory. He wanted Seraphina, not her sister, not any reasonable substitute. The specific woman who descended those stairs 4 years ago and made him remember what it felt like to want something beyond power. And now he had to figure out how to claim her while legally bound to someone else. The study door opened without knock or warning. Lucien did not turn from the window. Only one person in his household possessed enough arrogance to enter uninvited. "You look like death," James Cartwright observed. Lucien's oldest friend crossed the room and poured himself whiskey from the sideboard despite the early hour. At 35, James had the weathered face of a man who survived too many battlefields and the sharp eyes of someone who missed nothing. They met at Eton when Lucien was 15, and James was the headmaster's son who taught him that survival required more than inherited titles. You needed allies, strategy, and the willingness to break rules that served no purpose except controlling people. "I feel worse than I look," Lucien replied, "which, given your description, suggests I should be dead." James settled into the leather chair across from Lucien's desk. "Want to talk about why you married the wrong woman last night?" "No." "Going to, anyway?" Lucien finally turned from the window. His reflection in the glass looked haggard, older, like someone had aged him a decade overnight. "They switched her." James raised an eyebrow. "Who switched who?" "Lady Vale sent Evangeline instead of Seraphina, put her beneath the veil. Assumed I would not notice until after the ceremony. And you proceeded anyway." "I proceeded strategically," Lucien corrected. "Exposing the fraud publicly would have created scandal that damaged my reputation alongside theirs." "Better to control the narrative." James studied him over the rim of his glass. "That is an excellent rationalization for a man who just made a catastrophic mistake." Lucien's jaw tightened. "I did not make a mistake. You married a woman you do not want, while the one you do want is currently locked in her family's residence." James set down his glass. "That sounds like a mistake to me. It is a temporary complication." "Temporary." James laughed without humor. "Lucien, you cannot annul this marriage without admitting you were deceived at your own wedding. Every business rival you have will use it as evidence that the great Duke of Ravenmere can be manipulated. Your political enemies will crucify you in Parliament. The scandal will destroy years of carefully built reputation. Then I will find another solution." "What solution?" "You are legally married to Evangeline Vale. The church witnessed it. The crown recognizes it. Short of her dying conveniently, you are bound to her until death separates you." The words hung in the air like smoke. Lucien heard what James was not quite saying. The implication that aristocratic men throughout history had solved inconvenient marriage problems through accidents that looked like natural causes. He rejected the thought immediately. He was ruthless, not a murderer. "There are other options," Lucien said quietly. James leaned forward. "Name one that does not destroy you in the process." Lucien had no answer. He turned back to the window where London woke beneath rain that refused to stop. Out there, somewhere in Grosvenor Square, Seraphina Vale was living whatever consequences her refusal had triggered. He needed to see her, understand why she rejected his offer, discover if what he felt was genuine or merely obsession disguised as fascination. "I am going to the Vale residence," Lucien announced. James stood abruptly. "That is a terrible idea." "Probably. You just married her sister. Showing up at their door 12 hours later will look like you are either insane or planning retribution." "Good," Lucien said. "Let them wonder which." He left James standing in the study and climbed the stairs to the Duchess' chambers. Morning light filtered through hallway windows, illuminating portraits of dead Ashbournes who built this legacy through calculated marriages and strategic alliances. None of them had ever been stupid enough to marry the wrong woman. Lucien stopped outside the bedroom door, considered knocking, decided against it. This was his house, his chambers. He did not need permission to enter. The room beyond was exactly as he remembered. Four-poster bed imported from Italy, wallpaper in deep blue silk, windows overlooking gardens that in better weather bloomed with roses his grandmother planted 40 years ago. In the center of that expensive luxury, Evangeline Vale sat at the vanity still wearing her wedding dress. She had not changed, had not slept, just sat there staring at her reflection like she did not recognize the woman looking back. She saw him in the mirror before he spoke. Her entire body tensed. "Your Grace." Lucien closed the door behind him. Evangeline turned on the vanity stool to face him directly. Even terrified and exhausted, she was beautiful. The kind of beauty that made men write bad poetry and challenge rivals to duels. He felt nothing. "Why did you agree to this?" Lucien asked. Not a question, a demand. Evangeline's hands twisted in her lap. Her mother insisted, said refusing would destroy the family. And you believed her. Tears gathered in those blue eyes. "I had no choice." Lucien moved closer, watched her shrink back. "We always have choices, Lady Evangeline. You chose to participate in fraud rather than face consequences. That was a decision. Own it." "I am sorry," she whispered. Sorry is what children say when they break things accidentally. "You committed calculated deception." "The two are not equivalent." Evangeline looked down at her hands. The wedding ring Lucien placed there last night caught morning light. It was supposed to grace Seraphina's finger. Instead, it trapped this frightened girl who probably spent her entire life being told her beauty excused every failure. "What will you do to me?" she asked quietly. Lucien considered her. This woman he did not want wearing his name, occupying space meant for someone else. The practical solution was to make her so miserable she requested annulment herself. But that level of cruelty served no purpose except satisfying his anger, and Lucien Ashbourne did not waste energy on pointless revenge. "Nothing," he said finally. "You will remain Duchess of Ravenmere, attend necessary social functions, manage household duties. In exchange, I will provide you with everything you need to live comfortably." Evangeline looked up sharply. "That is all?" "That is all." Hope flickered across her face, then confusion. "You do not want me to." Her voice trailed off, cheeks flushed. Lucien understood what she was trying to ask. The wedding night obligations aristocratic marriages demanded. The producing of heirs that justified these alliances. "No," he said bluntly. "We will maintain separate chambers. I have no interest in touching you." The word should have insulted her. Instead, Evangeline exhaled like someone had removed a blade from her throat. "Thank you, Your Grace." "Do not thank me," Lucien said coldly. "This arrangement serves my purposes, not your comfort. You wanted to be a duchess. Now you are one. Play the role competently and we will tolerate each other. Disappoint me and you will discover exactly how unpleasant I can make your existence." He turned to leave. "Your Grace?" Evangeline called after him. "What about Seraphina?" Lucien paused at the door. "What about her?" "She locked herself away because she believed you would expose the deception. She sacrificed herself to protect the family from your revenge." The information landed like a fist to the stomach. Lucien turned slowly. Evangeline met his gaze with something that looked almost like courage. "My mother told Seraphina that if she did not cooperate, you would destroy us all. Seraphina refused to attend the wedding because she thought her absence would force you to either proceed with me or cancel entirely. Either way, she believed she was protecting everyone." Anger burned through Lucien's chest. Not at Evangeline, at Lady Vivian Vale, who had weaponized one daughter's compassion while selling the other's beauty. Where is she now? He demanded. Still locked in her rooms. Mother stationed servants outside to ensure she does not leave. Lucien did not wait for more explanation. He left the Duchess' chambers, descended the stairs 3 at a time, and shouted for his carriage with enough force that servants scattered like frightened birds. James appeared in the entrance hall. I told you this was a bad idea. Then come along and watch me make it worse, Lucien snapped. They rode through London's rain-soaked streets in silence. The carriage wheels threw mud across cobblestones while early morning merchants opened shops and servants hauled water from communal pumps. This city had been Lucien's battlefield for 15 years. He conquered it through steel mills and textile factories and railway investments that made him wealthier than men who inherited kingdoms. He learned every trick aristocracy used to maintain power and then broke those rules systematically. But none of that prepared him for this. Wanting a woman who chose sacrifice over survival. The Vale residence looked worse in daylight than it had during his previous visit. Paint peeled from window frames. The front steps had cracks wide enough to lose coins in. A building slowly collapsing while the family inside pretended they still owned grandeur. Lucien did not bother knocking. He walked through the front door like he owned it. A startled butler tried to block his path. Your Grace, Lady Vale is not receiving visitors. I am not a visitor, Lucien said. I am family now. Move. The butler's face went pale. He stepped aside. Lady Vivian appeared at the top of the stairs wearing a dressing gown and the expression of someone who had been woken by artillery fire. Your Grace, this is most unexpected. Where is she? Lady Vivian descended slowly. Her Grace the Duchess is at Ashbourne House where she belongs. Not Evangeline, Lucien corrected. Seraphina. Lady Vivian's face hardened. My elder daughter is indisposed. She cannot receive visitors. I was not requesting permission, Lucien said quietly. Which room? Lady Vivian positioned herself between Lucien and the staircase. Your Grace, I must insist that you leave immediately. This behavior is highly inappropriate. Lucien looked past her to the frightened servants watching from doorways. Which room? He repeated. Answer, or I start kicking down doors until I find her myself. A young maid near the kitchen entrance pointed shakily toward the 3rd floor. East wing, Your Grace. The blue room. Lucien took the stairs without acknowledging Lady Vivian's protests. James followed, not helping but not stopping him either. The 3rd floor hallway smelled like mildew and old carpet. Portraits of Vale ancestors watched with the same disappointment that seemed genetic in this family. 2 male servants stood outside a door at the hallway's end. They moved to block Lucien's approach. His Grace the Duke is not permitted entry, one said nervously. Lucien did not slow down. He hit the first servant hard enough to send him sprawling. The second one released an undignified yelp and fled. Behind him, James sighed. You could have just asked them to move. Faster this way, Lucien replied. He tried the door handle. Locked. Of course, he stepped back and kicked just below the lock with enough force that wood splintered. The door crashed inward. The room beyond was small, sparsely furnished, a bed, a wardrobe, a single window overlooking the street. No books, no personal items. The kind of space you give someone you want to forget exists. In the center of that emptiness stood Seraphina Vale. She wore a simple gray dress, hair loose around her shoulders, no jewelry, no decoration. She looked like someone had stripped away every aristocratic pretense until only the essential person remained. Those storm gray eyes met his without fear. Your Grace, she said calmly, I see you have married my sister. The words should have sounded accusatory. Instead, they carried the flat tone of someone stating obvious facts. Lucien entered the room, kicked the broken door closed behind him. James remained in the hallway, providing whatever privacy a splintered door allowed. You refuse to attend, Lucien said. Yes. Why? Seraphina moved to the window, looked down at the street where rain continued falling. Because accepting would have made me complicit in fraud. My mother planned this substitution weeks ago. I discovered it 3 days before the wedding, and said nothing. What should I have said, Your Grace? Warning you would have exposed my family to ruin. Attending would have made me party to deception. I chose the only option that preserved both your dignity and my integrity. By locking yourself away like a prisoner. Seraphina turned from the window. The bottom. Better a prisoner with clean conscience than a duchess built on lies. The logic was sound. Infuriating, but sound. Lucien crossed the room until he stood close enough to see gold flecks in her eyes, close enough to smell lavender and rain. You sacrificed yourself to protect people who treat you like an inconvenience, he said quietly. They are still my family. Family is supposed to protect you, Seraphina. Not auction you to the highest bidder, then substitute you for better merchandise when it suits their purposes. Something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe. Or the kind of resignation people develop after years of disappointment. My value to them ended at birth when I was born female instead of male. Everything since has been managing their disappointment. Lucien studied her. This woman who spoke about her own disposability like discussing weather. Did you read my letter? Yes. And I appreciated your honesty, Your Grace. It changed nothing, but I appreciated it. It should have changed everything, Lucien. And said, I offered you escape, partnership, freedom from the prison your family built around you. Seraphina's expression hardened. You offered me a different prison. Prettier, certainly. More comfortable. But still a cage where I would exist at your pleasure rather than my own autonomy. That is not what I offered. Is it not? Seraphina moved closer. You are a man accustomed to owning things, Your Grace. Factories, estates, political influence. You saw me and decided I would be yours. The language in your letter was prettier than most marriage proposals, but the underlying message was identical. Submit to me and I will treat you well. I offered partnership, Lucien corrected. Partnership implies equality. Seraphina's voice remained calm, but her eyes blazed. Can you honestly claim we would have been equals? You with your wealth and title and power? Me with nothing except what you chose to allow me? The accusation landed perfectly. Lucien wanted to argue, to explain that his intentions were different, better. But the truth sat heavy in his chest. She was right. He had pursued Seraphina like a business acquisition, identified what he wanted, calculated the most efficient path to possession, deployed resources to achieve the objective. At no point had he considered that she might not want to be acquired. You are correct, he said finally. I approached you the same way I approach everything, as something to be won. Seraphina's expression suggested she had not expected agreement. Most men argue when women point out their arrogance. But I am not most men, Lucien continued, and you are not most women, which is why I am standing in your mother's house 12 hours after marrying your sister, trying to understand why the only person in London who treats me like a human instead of a title is the same person who just destroyed my carefully planned future. I destroyed nothing, Your Grace. You still have your duchess, your alliance, your reputation. I have none of the things that matter. The confession escaped before Lucien could stop it. Raw, unguarded, the kind of honesty that felt like handing someone a loaded weapon. Seraphina stared at him. What matters to you? You, Lucien said simply. I want you, Seraphina, not your sister, not any reasonable substitute. You specifically, your intelligence, your strength, the way you refuse to pretend the world is kinder than it actually is. Silence filled the small room. Outside, rain hammered windows. Somewhere downstairs, Lady Vivian was probably planning how to salvage this disaster. Seraphina stepped closer, close enough that Lucien could see the pulse beating in her throat. You cannot have me, Your Grace. You are married to Evangeline, a detail I am working to resolve. A detail I am... How, exactly? Annulment requires proving non-consummation or fraud. The former exposes you to scandal. The latter admits you were deceived at your own wedding. Neither option serves your purposes. Lucien smiled without humor. Then I will find a third option. There is no third option. There is always a third option, Seraphina. I have built everything I own by refusing to accept limitations other men consider absolute. He reached out slowly, gave her time to step away. She did not move. Lucien brushed his thumb across her cheekbone with the same care people use handling weapons that might explode. Come with me, he said quietly. Where? Ravenmere Hall. Away from this house, away from your mother. I will give you your own chambers, your own household, complete autonomy over how you spend your time. As what? Seraphina asked. Your mistress? The word made Lucien flinch. As my partner. Whatever legal complications exist with Evangeline can be managed. But I refuse to leave you here in this prison pretending you deserve nothing better. Seraphina pulled away from his touch. You are asking me to become your kept woman while your legal wife plays Duchess in public. How is that better than the marriage you originally proposed? Because you would choose it, Lucien said. Not because your family forced you. Not because you had no options. Because you decided for yourself that whatever we build together is worth the scandal it will cause. And if I refuse, then I will respect your decision, but you will still leave this house. Seraphina's eyes narrowed. You cannot force me to go anywhere. Watch me, Lucien said. Your mother locked you in this room like a prisoner. I am offering release. Take it, or I will carry you out myself and dare anyone to stop me. That is kidnapping. Call it whatever you want. You are not staying here. They stood facing each other in the small room while rain drummed against windows and London woke to news of the Duke of Ravenmere's scandalous wedding. Finally, Seraphina spoke. If I agree to this arrangement, I have conditions. Name them. I want complete financial independence. An account in my own name with enough money to leave whenever I choose. Done. I want access to your business dealings, not as decoration, as genuine partner with decision-making authority. Lucien hesitated. That went beyond what any aristocratic husband would agree to. Women did not participate in business. It was not done. But nothing about this situation followed normal rules. Agreed, he said. And I want the truth, Seraphina continued. Always. No pretty lies to protect my feelings. If you grow bored of me, I want you to say it directly rather than humiliating me through mistresses and public affairs. The condition revealed exactly how much damage her family had inflicted. She expected abandonment, betrayal, the inevitable disappointment that came from trusting powerful men. I will never lie to you, Lucien promised, and I do not share. Seraphina studied him for a long moment. Those gray eyes dissected him with surgical precision, looking for the trap she knew existed somewhere beneath his words. Then I accept, she said finally. Relief crashed through Lucien's chest. He wanted to grab her, pull her close, kiss her the way he should have kissed her at the altar instead of her sister. He did none of those things. Instead, he extended his hand formally. Shall we go inform your mother that you are leaving? Seraphina placed her hand in his. Her fingers were cold despite the room's stuffiness. Led the way, Your Grace. They descended the stairs together. Lady Vivian waited in the entrance hall looking like someone facing execution. Servants pressed against walls trying to disappear. You cannot take her, Lady Vivian said desperately. Seraphina is unmarried. Her reputation will be destroyed. Her reputation survived being locked in this house for 3 days, Lucien replied. I expect it will survive living under my protection. This is madness, Lady Vivian hissed. The scandal will ruin us all. The scandal will be managed. Lucien kept walking toward the front door. And Lady Vale, if you attempt to interfere, I will carry out every threat I made last night. Test me if you doubt my sincerity. He pulled Seraphina through the door into morning rain. James waited beside the carriage, looking unsurprised by how catastrophically this visit had deteriorated. Lovely day for kidnapping, James observed. Not kidnapping, Lucien corrected. Rescue. They climbed into the carriage. Seraphina sat across from him, rain-soaked and shivering, looking like someone who had just jumped off a cliff and was still falling. Lucien removed his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. Are you going to regret this? Seraphina pulled the coat tighter. Ask me in a month. The carriage rolled through London toward Ravenmere House. Behind them, the Vale residents disappeared into rain and fog. Ahead lay complications Lucien had not fully calculated. A legal wife who did not want him. A woman he wanted who refused to be owned. Business rivals who would use this scandal to undermine his authority. Political enemies who would paint him as morally corrupt. But as Seraphina sat across from him wearing his coat and looking like courage personified, Lucien realized something that should have terrified him. He did not care about the consequences anymore. For 15 years, he built an empire through ruthless calculation. Every decision measured against strategic value. Every risk analyzed for potential return. This woman represented the first time in his adult life he chose something because he wanted it. Not because it made sense. Not because it advanced his goals. Because looking at her made him remember what it felt like to be human instead of a machine built for accumulating power. The carriage turned onto the avenue leading to Ashbourne House. Lucien watched Seraphina study the approaching mansion with the same analytical gaze she probably gave everything. This is not going to end well, she said quietly. Probably not, Lucien agreed. Then why are we doing this? Because some things are worth destroying yourself over. Seraphina looked at him directly. Those storm-gray eyes held something that looked almost like sympathy. "You are going to regret choosing me over stability." "Maybe," Lucien said, "but I spent my entire life being stable. I am curious what chaos feels like." The carriage stopped at the front entrance. Servants appeared with umbrellas. James climbed out first, then offered his hand to help Seraphina descend. Before she took it, she turned back to Lucien. "For what it is worth, Your Grace, I hope you prove me wrong about powerful men." Then she was gone, disappearing into his house, wearing his coat like armor. Lucien sat alone in the carriage, watching rain wash over London. Somewhere upstairs, Evangeline probably heard the commotion and was drawing her own conclusions about her husband arriving home with her sister. Let her wonder. Let them all wonder. Because the Duke of Ravenmere had just made the first genuinely reckless decision of his carefully controlled life. And there was absolutely no going back. The first week passed like walking through glass. Every step drew blood, but stopping meant worse wounds. Seraphina occupied the West Wing chambers overlooking gardens that in summer probably bloomed with enough flowers to make poets weep. Now they held only bare branches and frost-killed grass. She refused servants except for meals delivered to her door, refused invitations to dine with Lucien, refused every attempt at conversation that lasted longer than necessary pleasantries. She was keeping her distance, protecting herself. Smart. Lucien understood strategy. He had deployed it ruthlessly for 15 years, but understanding did not make the rejection easier to swallow. Meanwhile, Evangeline played Duchess with surprising competence. She attended social functions, managed household staff, smiled at dinner parties while Lucien sat beside her feeling like a man watching someone else live his life. London's elite watched the arrangement with fascination, usually reserved for bear baiting and public hangings. The Duke of Ravenmere had married one sister and installed the other in his household within a week. Scandal did not adequately describe it. This was aristocratic theater at its most depraved. Let them talk. Words could not touch him, but the silence from Seraphina was carving holes through his chest. On the 8th day, Lucien found her in the library at midnight. She sat curled in the leather chair he usually occupied, reading by lamplight, looking small inside the massive room lined with books his grandfather collected and his father never read. She glanced up when he entered, then returned to her book without comment. Lucien poured whiskey from the sideboard. "You cannot avoid me forever." "I am not avoiding you," Seraphina replied without looking up. "I am simply occupying different space at different times." Semantics. Accuracy. Lucien crossed the room, sat in the chair opposite hers. She continued reading, or pretending to read. Her eyes had not moved across the page since he entered. "We need to discuss arrangements," Lucien said. "What arrangements, Your Grace?" "Financial independence. Business partnership. The conditions you demanded before agreeing to come here." Seraphina closed her book, set it aside. Those gray eyes met his with the same cool assessment she had given him in her mother's house. "I have reconsidered. The financial independence and business partnership." She spoke calmly, clinically, like discussing weather. "I do not want them." Lucien felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Why not?" "Because accepting would create obligation. I would owe you for wealth and opportunity. That debt would give you leverage I refuse to grant." "I offered those things freely," Lucien said. "No strings attached." "Nothing is ever truly free, Your Grace. Everything has a price. I prefer to pay mine up front rather than discover later what interest you were charging." The accusation landed like a slap. Lucien wanted to argue, to explain his intentions were genuine. But how did you convince someone that power would not corrupt into control when every interaction proved her suspicions correct? He was a duke. She was a woman living in his house under his protection. The imbalance was structural, inescapable. "What do you want then?" Lucien asked quietly. "Time," Seraphina replied, "and distance. I agreed to come here because staying with my mother was untenable, but I did not agree to become your project or your obsession. You are not a project. Then what am I?" The question hung between them. Lucien did not have a good answer. Partner felt presumptuous. Lover felt premature. Friend felt insufficient for what burned in his chest when he looked at her. "You are the only person in London who treats me like a human being instead of a title," he said finally. Seraphina's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "That is because I do not care about your title, Your Grace. Dukes and dustmen die the same way. turn to the same dust. Your wealth and power mean nothing to me. Then what does mean something to you? Honesty, integrity, the willingness to admit when you are wrong instead of using authority to crush opposition. Lucien leaned forward. I can offer all those things, can you? Seraphina's voice remained gentle, but her eyes were hard. You are a man accustomed to winning, Your Grace, to bending circumstances until they serve your purposes. What happens when I do something you disagree with? When I challenge you publicly? When I make decisions that undermine your authority? Then we negotiate like equals, Lucien said. And if negotiation fails, then we fail together. The answer surprised even him. Lucien Ashbourne did not accept failure. He eliminated obstacles, crushed resistance, rewrote rules until reality matched his vision. But sitting across from this woman who refused to be impressed by anything he built, he realized something terrifying. He would rather fail with her than succeed alone. Seraphina studied him for a long moment. Outside the library windows, London slept beneath stars, barely visible through factory smoke and fog. I need time, she repeated, to understand if what you are offering is real or merely another cage with better decoration. Take all the time you need, Lucien said. I'm not going anywhere. She stood, collected her book, moved toward the door with the same careful grace she brought to everything. At the threshold, she paused. Your Grace, why me? There are 1,000 women in London more beautiful, more accomplished, more suited to being a duchess. Lucien met her gaze across the room. Because you are the only one who looked at me and saw the monster I actually am, instead of the legend everyone else believes. And that appeals to you? It feels like truth, Lucien said. Everything else is performance. Seraphina nodded slowly, then left without another word. Lucien sat alone in the library until dawn, wondering if he had just made progress or confirmed every suspicion that kept her distant. The answer came 6 days later, in the form of betrayal so complete it nearly destroyed him. TAC, the Board of Northern Industry met quarterly to discuss investments spanning textile manufacturing, steel production, and railway expansion across England's industrial territories. 12 men controlled enough wealth to reshape the British economy. They answered to no parliament, no crown authority, only profit margins and competitive advantage. Lucien had built his seat at that table through 15 years of calculated brutality. He owned controlling interest in 7 factories and held leverage over 6 of the 12 board members through debts, scandals, or strategic alliances. The March meeting occurred at Ashbourne House in the grand ballroom converted temporarily into a boardroom. Mahogany table imported from India. Chairs upholstered in leather that cost more than most families earned in a year. Maps of England's industrial regions covering one entire wall. Lucien arrived early. He always arrived early. Preparation was the difference between control and chaos. James Cartwright was already there reviewing contract proposals. He looked up when Lucien entered. Feeling ready for battle? Always, Lucien replied. The other board members filtered in over the next 30 minutes. Lord Hartwick, who controlled coal mines across Wales. Sir Edmund Pierce, whose shipping empire transported goods to continental Europe. Marcus Devlin, who built steel foundries that supplied half of England's construction industry. Each man more ruthless than the last. Predators circling the same territory. The meeting began with standard business. Production numbers. Profit margins. Expansion proposals. Lucien participated with the same cold efficiency that made him wealthy. Then came the proposal that changed everything. Lord Hartwick cleared his throat. Gentlemen, I believe we need to address the situation with Ashbourne Industries. The room went silent. Lucien looked up from the contract he had been reviewing. What situation? Hartwick glanced at the other board members. Several nodded almost imperceptibly. Your recent personal scandal has created significant reputational risk for our collective interests. My personal life is irrelevant to business operations, Lucien said flatly. Normally I would agree, Hartwick continued, but marrying one woman and installing her sister as your mistress within the same week creates optics that damage investor confidence. Clients are questioning our moral standards. Parliament members are suggesting increased regulatory oversight of our industries. Then educate them on the difference between personal conduct and business competence, Lucien replied. We attempted that approach, Sir Edmund interjected. It is not working. The scandal is too large, too public. It reflects poorly on everyone at this table. Lucien set down the contract, looked around the room at men he had negotiated with, competed against, and occasionally allied with for over a decade. What are you proposing? That you step back from your board position until the scandal subsides, Hartwick said. Temporarily, of course. 6 months. Perhaps a year. The suggestion was absurd. Insulting. Lucien controlled too much infrastructure for them to simply remove him without catastrophic consequences. He started to say exactly that when Marcus Devlin spoke. We have already secured majority vote, Devlin said quietly. 10 of 12 board members agreed this morning. The decision is final. The words hit like physical impact. Lucien felt his entire world tilt sideways. 10 of 12. That meant 2 people voted against the removal. He looked at James, who met his gaze with fury burning behind professional restraint. James voted with him. Always had. That left 1 other person. Who was the second vote? Lucien asked. His voice sounded distant, detached, like hearing someone else speak. Uncomfortable silence filled the room. Then the door to the adjacent parlor opened, and Seraphina Vale walked into the boardroom. She wore deep blue silk that made her gray eyes look like storm clouds. Hair gathered at her nape. No jewelry except a simple necklace. She moved with confidence that came from decision rather than breeding. Lucien stared at her. His brain refused to process what he was seeing. Lady Seraphina holds proxy votes for 3 board members, Lord Hartwick explained. She purchased the proxies this morning using funds from an independent account established in her name. The world stopped making sense. Lucien looked at Seraphina, who stood at the far end of the table, meeting his gaze without flinching. How? He managed. Your business rival, Lord Cedric Beaumont, Seraphina said calmly. He was quite helpful in arranging the financial transactions. Cedric Beaumont, the man Lucien had destroyed after the garden incident. The politician who lost everything when Lucien decided to make an example of what happened to men who touched things that belonged to him. Apparently Cedric had been rebuilding, quietly, strategically, using Seraphina as his weapon. Why? Lucien asked. The question came out broken, raw. Because you needed to understand what powerlessness feels like, Seraphina replied. You have spent 15 years controlling everything around you, bending circumstances to your will, never experiencing what it means to have choices removed by someone with more leverage. So this was revenge, Lucien said. This was education. By destroying my position at the table I built? By proving that the power you worship is temporary, Seraphina said. Fragile. One good betrayal away from collapse. Lucien pushed back from the table, stood, looked around at men who had just voted him out of his own empire. Men he had made wealthy through strategic alliances and calculated risks. Not one of them met his eyes. He turned back to Seraphina. You used me. I accepted your hospitality while planning your removal, she corrected. The distinction matters. Not to me. Then perhaps you are beginning to understand how women feel when powerful men reduce them to chess pieces in games they did not consent to playing. The accusation landed perfectly. Lucien heard the truth beneath her words. She was right. He had pursued her like an acquisition, removed her from her family home, installed her in his household, made decisions about her future without asking if she wanted the future he was building. And now she was teaching him what that felt like. The lesson was destroying him. You win, Lucien said quietly. I hope the victory tastes sweet. He walked toward the door. James started to follow, but Lucien shook his head. Stay. Make sure they do not steal anything else while I am gone. The hallway outside the boardroom felt longer than usual. Servants pressed against walls as he passed. They knew. Of course they knew. Household staff always knew everything before the people living upstairs figured it out. Lucien climbed to his private study on the 3rd floor, closed the door, locked it, stood in the center of the room where he had planned business strategies and political maneuvers and industrial expansions that made him one of the wealthiest men in Britain. None of it mattered, because the woman he chose over stability had just proven his worst fear correct. Trust was weakness. Opening yourself to another person gave them weapons to destroy you. He poured whiskey, drank it, poured more. The alcohol did nothing to numb the rage burning through his chest. Not rage at Seraphina, rage at himself, for being stupid enough to believe she wanted partnership instead of revenge, for thinking honesty would earn him something other than exploitation. For choosing her over the empire he spent his entire adult life building. The study door opened without knock or invitation. Lucien did not turn around, Only one person in the household was arrogant enough to pick locks. That went poorly, James observed. Understatement. James crossed to the sideboard, poured his own whiskey, stood beside Lucien looking out the window at London sprawling beneath gray afternoon light. She played you perfectly, James said. I am almost impressed. Almost. If she was not using it to dismantle your life, I would hire her myself. Lucien laughed without humor. What do I do now? James considered the question seriously. You have options. Challenge the board vote through legal mechanisms. Expose Cedric Beaumont's involvement and force parliamentary investigation. Destroy Seraphina's reputation so thoroughly she becomes unemployable. All of which make me look weak, Lucien said. No. All of which make you look human. James turned to face him directly. You have spent 15 years convincing everyone you are invincible. A machine that never makes mistakes, never shows weakness, never fails. And now I have failed spectacularly. Yes, James agreed. Publicly, humiliatingly, in front of men who will use this against you for years. Not helping, James. I'm not trying to help. James set down his glass. I'm trying to make you understand that this might be the best thing that ever happened to you. Lucien stared at his oldest friend. Have you lost your mind? Probably, James said. But consider this. You were becoming the monster everyone accused you of being. Cold, unfeeling, capable of destroying anyone who challenged you without hesitation. Seraphina just proved you are still capable of being hurt. That means you are still capable of being human. Being human feels terrible, Lucien said. Being invulnerable felt worse. James picked up his glass again. You just did not notice because you were too busy crushing everyone who reminded you that you bled. The words sat heavy between them. Outside, carriages moved through streets. Merchants closed shops. London prepared for evening the same way it had for centuries. Inside Ashbourne House, a man who built an empire through ruthless calculation tried to figure out what came next. The answer arrived an hour later, in the form of Seraphina standing at his study door. She did not ask permission to enter, just walked in and closed the door behind her. Stood across from him with the same steady composure she brought to everything. You came to gloat, Lucien said flatly. I came to explain. There is nothing to explain. You wanted revenge for me forcing you into this situation. You got it. Congratulations. Seraphina moved closer. This was not revenge. Then what was it? A test. Lucien looked at her, really looked at her, trying to understand if this was another manipulation or something genuine beneath the strategy. A test of what? He asked. Whether you would choose power or me when forced to pick only one. I chose you over stability when I brought you here, Lucien said. That should have answered your question. Actions under favorable conditions prove nothing, Seraphina replied. Anyone can be generous when it costs them nothing. The real measure of character is what you do when the price becomes unbearable. So you destroyed my position to see how I would react? I created circumstances where you had to choose, Seraphina corrected, between retaliating against me to salvage your reputation or accepting the loss without turning into the monster everyone fears. And if I choose retaliation, then I was correct about you, and leaving was the right decision. Leaving, Lucien repeated. You are going back to your mother? No, Seraphina said. I arranged alternative accommodation. Independent wealth through the proxies I purchased. I will survive regardless of your decision. The plan was elegant, ruthless. Exactly the kind of strategy Lucien would have deployed if their positions were reversed. He should have been furious, should have been planning how to dismantle everything she built, should have been calculating revenge. Instead, he felt something unexpected. Relief. Because she was right. He needed to learn what powerlessness felt like. Needed to understand that control was illusion, that the empire he built could collapse if the wrong person applied pressure to the right weakness. And more importantly, he needed to prove to himself that Seraphina mattered more than the power he had worshipped for 15 years. You're terrifying, he said quietly. I learned from watching you, she replied. Lucien crossed the room, stood close enough to see gold flecks in those gray eyes, close enough to smell lavender and something sharper underneath. Fear, maybe, or anticipation of violence she half expected him to deliver. I am not going to retaliate, he said. Seraphina's expression flickered. Surprise. Suspicion. Why not? Because you are more important than the board position, more important than reputation. More important than every strategic alliance I built over 15 years. Prove it. How? Walk away from the empire, Seraphina said. Completely. Sell your interests. Liquidate your holdings. Become nobody. The suggestion was insane. Everything he owned, everything he built, gone. And then what? Lucien asked. Then we discover if what you feel is real or merely obsession with something you could not control. You want me to destroy my life to prove I care about you? I want you to choose me over power when the choice actually costs you everything. They stood facing each other in the study while afternoon dissolved into evening. Outside the window, London lit lamps against gathering darkness. Lucien thought about the boy he had been at 15, orphaned, drowning in debts, terrified of becoming nothing. He spent 17 years building armor against that fear, wealth, influence, the kind of power that made people afraid to challenge him. All of it designed to ensure he never felt helpless again. And now Seraphina was asking him to surrender everything that kept the terror at bay. The old Lucien would have refused, would have crushed her for daring to suggest it, would have proven through systematic destruction that nobody made demands of the Duke of Ravenmere. But the man standing in this study was not the same person who married the wrong woman 2 weeks ago. That man was already gone, broken by betrayal, rebuilt by realizing that the armor he built had become a prison. All right, Lucien said. Seraphina blinked. All right, I will do it. Sell everything, walk away from the board, become nobody. You cannot be serious. I'm completely serious, Lucien said. You're right. I spent my entire adult life confusing power with safety, building control to avoid vulnerability. It made me wealthy. It made me feared. It made me miserable. And you think abandoning everything will make you happy? I think being with you might, Lucien replied. The rest is negotiable. Seraphina stared at him, looking for the trick, the manipulation hiding beneath apparent capitulation. She would not find it, because there was none. Lucien Ashbourne had just made the most genuine decision of his carefully calculated life. He was choosing the woman who terrified him over the empire that defined him, and there was absolutely no going back. Seraphina's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. You are either the bravest man I have ever met or the most foolish. Probably both, Lucien said. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel warmth radiating from her skin. What happens now? Now I figure out how to dismantle an empire without destroying everyone who depends on it, Lucien replied. Then we discover what kind of man I become when power stops defining me. And if you hate who that man is, then I will have learned something important about myself. Either way, I refuse to spend another 17 years becoming the monster everyone already thinks I am. Seraphina reached up, touched his face with fingers that trembled slightly. I did not expect you to choose this. I know, Lucien said. That is why I had to. She kissed him then. Not gently, not sweetly. With the kind of desperate intensity people bring to decisions that cannot be undone. Lucien pulled her closer, felt her body against his, tasted salt from tears that finally fell. When they broke apart, Seraphina looked wrecked. Beautiful and wrecked. I am still leaving, she said. I know. But I will come back, she continued. When you have proven you can survive without the armor. When you have discovered who Lucien Ashbourne is instead of what the Duke of Ravenmere owns. And if that person disappoints you, then at least you tried, Seraphina said, which is more than most powerful men ever do. She left before he could respond, disappeared into the hallway, leaving him alone in the study with decisions that would reshape his entire existence. Lucien looked around at ledgers documenting his wealth, maps marking his territories, contracts proving his influence, all of it about to become irrelevant. He should have been terrified, should have been reconsidering, should have been calculating how to salvage what remained. Instead, he felt something he had not experienced since his father died. Hope. Because the Duke of Ravenmere was about to do something unprecedented in England's rigid aristocracy. He was going to discover if the man beneath the title was worth saving, and whether the woman who saw that man hidden under layers of ruthless ambition would still want him when the armor finally came off. Dismantling an empire is not dramatic. There are no explosions, no grand theatrical moments, just endless meetings with solicitors who speak in language designed to obscure rather than clarify. Paperwork that weighs more than the decisions it represents. Signatures that erase 17 years of calculated brutality with single strokes of ink. Lucien spent 3 weeks methodically destroying everything he built. He sold controlling interests in 7 factories to competitors who would treat workers worse but pay higher dividends to investors who cared only about profit margins. He liquidated steel holdings to men who would strip mines bare, then abandon towns when resources ran dry. He transferred railway shares to corporations that would raise prices until families chose between food and transportation. Every transaction made him wealthier while making the world measurably worse. The irony was not lost on him. James watched the systematic destruction with the expression of a man attending a funeral for someone who was not quite dead yet. They sat in Ian's study reviewing the final contracts that would sever his connection to the Board of Northern Industry permanently. "You're actually doing this," James said. Not a question. An observation tinged with disbelief. "I gave my word," Lucien replied. "Your word to a woman who orchestrated your removal from the most powerful business coalition in England. My word to the woman who proved I was becoming exactly what I swore I would never be." James poured whiskey, drank it, poured more. "And what were you swearing not to become?" "My father," Lucien said quietly. The admission hung in the air like gun smoke. Lucien rarely spoke about the man who died when he was 15 and left him drowning in debts that should have destroyed him. The aristocrat who gambled away estates and died drunk in a London brothel while his son learned what powerlessness tasted like. "Your father was weak," James said. "You are anything but." "My father confused control with strength," Lucien corrected. He believed that dominating everyone around him proved his superiority. When that failed, he destroyed himself rather than admit he was wrong. "And you think selling your empire proves you are different?" "I think choosing vulnerability over control proves I learned something he never did," Lucien said. "That real strength is measured by what you can lose without becoming a monster in response." James studied him across the desk. "You are in love with her?" It was not a question, but Lucien answered anyway. "Yes. And if she never comes back, then I will have discovered who I am without the armor. Either way, I refuse to spend the rest of my life becoming my father." James nodded slowly, set down his glass, stood. "I have known you since we were 15 years old, watched you build an empire from ashes, seen you crush men who thought they could manipulate you. This is the first time I have ever been proud of you." The words hit harder than expected. Lucien looked up at his oldest friend and saw something he had not recognized before. Concern, not for business interests or strategic alliances. For him, the person beneath the Duke. "Thank you," Lucien said. "Do not thank me yet," James replied. "You're about to discover how London treats men who fall from power. It will not be gentle." He was correct. The rumors started within days. Whispers in gentlemen's clubs, speculation in drawing rooms, newspaper articles that stopped just short of libel while implying everything they legally could not print. The Duke of Ravenmere was selling his empire. Why? Some claimed financial disaster. Others suggested blackmail. A few brave souls printed what everyone whispered privately, that he was doing it for a woman. The mockery was immediate and brutal. Cartoons appeared in penny papers showing Lucien as a lovesick fool led by the nose. Satirical poems circulated through social circles depicting him as Samson shorn by Delilah. Aristocratic men who once deferred to him now laughed openly at his name. Lucien endured it with the same cold discipline he applied to everything else. Let them laugh. Words only had power if you cared about the speakers. But some attacks cut deeper than others. Lord Cedric Beaumont emerged from whatever shadows he had been hiding in and published an editorial in the London Times. The piece was masterful. It never mentioned Lucien by name, but everyone knew exactly who it described. A cautionary tale about powerful men who mistake obsession for love, who confuse possession with devotion, who destroy themselves chasing women clever enough to manipulate their arrogance. Lucien read the editorial 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of calculated cruelty. Cedric was not just mocking him, he was claiming credit for the destruction, suggesting that Seraphina had been his weapon all along, that everything from the proxy votes to the empire liquidation had been orchestrated by a man patient enough to wait for revenge. The implication was clear. Lucien had not chosen love over power. He had been played by someone smarter, and London was eating it alive. Evangeline found him in the study that evening. She entered quietly, stood near the door like someone expecting to be thrown out. "Your Grace, may I speak with you?" Lucien looked up from the whiskey he had been staring at for the past hour. "You are the Duchess. You do not need permission to speak. She moved closer, sat in the chair across from his desk. Her beauty remained undeniable, but something had shifted in her expression. Less fear, more determination. I want an annulment, she said directly. Lucien set down his glass. Why now? Because I have spent 3 weeks watching you destroy yourself over a woman who left you. She met his gaze steadily. I deserve better than being married to a man who will never see me as anything except the sister he did not want. The honesty was refreshing. Brutal, but refreshing. You're correct, Lucien said. You deserve better than this arrangement. Will you grant the annulment? On one condition. Evangeline tensed. Name it. Tell me the truth about your mother's plan. All of it. Not the version Lady Vivian told you. What actually happened? Evangeline looked away. Silence stretched between them. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of confession. My mother arranged everything with Lord Beaumont 6 months before your proposal. They planned to force the marriage, then use Seraphina to destroy you from inside your own household. Lucien felt ice settle in his chest. Continue. Beaumont wanted revenge for what you did to him. Mother wanted money and status. Seraphina was supposed to be the weapon. Beautiful enough to obsess over. Intelligent enough to gain your trust. Cold enough to betray you when the moment was right. And what went wrong with their plan? Seraphina refused to participate, Evangeline said quietly. She discovered the conspiracy and locked herself away rather than become part of it. That is why Mother sent me instead. She thought substituting daughters would salvage the scheme, but Seraphina came to Ashbourne House anyway. Because you forced her, Evangeline said. Mother told her that refusing your offer would destroy the entire family. Seraphina chose to come here to protect us. Even knowing what Mother had planned, the revelation reframed everything, every moment of Seraphina's distance, her refusal of financial independence, her testing him through the board vote. She had not been executing Beaumont's plan. She had been trying to escape it while protecting people who treated her like currency, and Lucien had been too blind to see it. Where's Beaumont now? He asked quietly. I do not know, Evangeline admitted. Mother cut contact with him after the wedding failed to produce the results he wanted. Lucien stood, moved to the window overlooking gardens where frost had killed everything beautiful. His reflection stared back, haggard, older. A man who had spent 3 weeks dismantling his life based on incomplete information. The annulment is granted, he said. My solicitors will handle the paperwork. You will receive a settlement generous enough to ensure independence. Thank you, Your Grace. Do not thank me, Lucien said. I never should have married you in the first place. This is correction, not generosity. Evangeline stood, moved toward the door, paused at the threshold. For what it is worth, Your Grace, I hope you find her. Seraphina deserves better than the family she was born into. She left before Lucien could respond. He stood alone in the study watching night devour London. Somewhere in this sprawling city, Seraphina was living under whatever arrangements she made when she left. Independent, safe from her mother's manipulation and Beaumont's schemes, but not safe from the war that was about to erupt, because Lucien Ashbourne had just realized something terrifying. Lord Cedric Beaumont had not gotten his revenge yet. The editorial was not victory celebration. It was opening salvo, and Seraphina was standing directly in the blast radius. Lucien found James at his Mayfair residence 2 hours later. His friend answered the door in shirt sleeves and suspicion. This cannot be good news, James observed. Beaumont is planning something, Lucien said without preamble. Something larger than the board removal. James stepped aside. Let him enter. They moved to the study where maps of England's industrial regions covered one entire wall, remnants of a war they thought they had already won. What makes you think Beaumont is still operational? James asked. Because men like him do not stop until they have completely destroyed their targets, Lucien replied. Removing me from the board was tactical victory. He wants total annihilation. So what is his next move? Lucien spread the contracts he had been reviewing across James's desk. I liquidated my holdings to 12 different buyers. 7 of them have connections to Beaumont through shell corporations and proxy investments. James leaned over the documents. His expression darkened as he traced the financial connections. He is consolidating your empire under his own control. Not just consolidating, Lucien said. Weaponizing. If Beaumont controls the majority of northern industrial capacity, He can manipulate production to create artificial scarcity, drive prices up, force smaller competitors into bankruptcy. Within 2 years, he will control more economic power than the crown, and you just handed it to him. I handed it to men I thought were independent buyers, Lucien corrected. I did not see the pattern until tonight. Because you were too busy destroying yourself over a woman, James said bluntly. Yes, Lucien agreed, which means I gave Beaumont exactly what he wanted. Not just revenge. My entire empire reorganized under his authority. James poured whiskey for them both, drank his in one swallow. We need to stop him. How? Lucien asked. I have no board position, no leverage, no political capital. I liquidated everything that made me dangerous. You have one thing Beaumont cannot account for, James said. What? Nothing left to lose. The words settled between them like a blade finding home. James was right. Beaumont's plan relied on Lucien caring about reputation, about wealth, about maintaining the careful balance of power that defined aristocratic warfare. But the Duke of Ravenmere had already sacrificed everything on the altar of becoming human again, which meant he could fight without rules, without restraint, without concern for consequences that no longer mattered. We need to find Seraphina, Lucien said, before Beaumont does. You think he will go after her? I know he will, Lucien replied. She is the woman who refused to be his weapon, the loose thread in his perfect plan. He will either force her compliance or eliminate her entirely. James grabbed his coat. Where do we start? The only place Beaumont would think to look first. They rode through London in James's carriage. Rain had started again, always raining. Like the city was trying to wash away sins that had soaked too deep into the cobblestones. The Vale residence appeared abandoned. No lights in windows, no servants visible. The building looked like something waiting for demolition. Lucien did not bother knocking. He kicked in the front door with enough force that hinges tore from rotting wood. The entrance hall beyond smelled like mildew and desperation. Lady Vivian appeared at the top of the stairs. She wore a stained dressing gown and held a bottle of gin like a weapon. You, she spat. This is your fault. Where is Seraphina? Lucien demanded. Gone. Lady Vivian descended the stairs with the unsteady gait of someone who had been drinking for days. She left weeks ago, took her independence and abandoned her family to ruin. What ruin? Beaumont, Lady Vivian said. He promised me wealth and status if I helped destroy you. Instead, he took everything. The settlement you paid, the house, every penny. Lucien felt cold rage settle over him. Where is Beaumont now? Lady Vivian laughed. The sound was broken, unhinged. I do not know. He stopped returning my letters once he got what he wanted. And Seraphina? Where did she go? I do not know. Lady Vivian screamed. She left without telling me, without caring that her selfishness destroyed us all. She did not destroy you, Lucien said quietly. You destroyed yourself the moment you treated your daughters like commodities. He turned to leave. Wait, Lady Vivian called. You owe me. I gave you a daughter, 2 daughters. You owe me compensation. Lucien looked back at this pathetic woman who had orchestrated so much suffering through desperate ambition. I owe you nothing. You are receiving exactly what you earned. He left her screaming in the ruined entrance hall. Outside, rain had intensified to the point where visibility dropped to nothing. She is not there, Lucien told James. Then where? I do not know. But Beaumont is looking for her too. We need to find her first. They searched for 3 days, every boarding house in London, every residence that rented to single women, every location where someone fleeing family scandal might hide. Nothing. Seraphina had vanished completely. On the 4th day, a letter arrived at Ashbourne House. Plain envelope. No return address. Inside, a single page written in handwriting Lucien recognized immediately. Your Grace, by the time you read this, I will be gone from London. Lord Beaumont has made it clear that my continued existence represents a threat to his plans. Rather than endanger you further, I am removing myself from the situation entirely. Thank you for choosing to become someone better than the monster society expected. I hope you discover that the man beneath the armor was worth saving. Do not look for me. S. Lucien read the letter 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of what she was actually saying. She was running, not from him, from Beaumont, sacrificing herself again to protect people who did not deserve protection. The pattern was clear now. Seraphina had spent her entire life sacrificing herself for families and men who treated her like she was disposable. And she was doing it again. Unless someone stopped her. James found him in the study, burning the letter in the fireplace. The paper curled black, turned to ash, disappeared like it never existed. "Bad news?" James asked. "Seraphina left London," Lucien said. "Beaumont is hunting her. Then let him have her." James's voice was cold, practical. "She orchestrated your downfall. Why risk yourself for someone who betrayed you?" "Because she did not betray me," Lucien said. "She tested me. And I passed by choosing her over power. Now she is running because she thinks protecting me requires sacrificing herself. Noble," James observed. "Also stupid." "Yes," Lucien agreed. "Which is why I am going after her. You do not even know where she went. Then I will tear England apart until I find her." James studied him for a long moment. "You really have lost your mind." "Probably," Lucien said. "But I spent 17 years building an empire to protect myself from vulnerability. It made me wealthy and miserable. I would rather be poor and human than powerful and dead inside." James sighed, poured whiskey, drank it. "When do we leave?" "We? You think I'm letting you do this alone?" James set down his glass. "I have known you since we were 15. Watched you survive things that would have broken weaker men. This is the first time you have ever fought for something that actually matters." "She matters," Lucien said quietly. "I know," James replied, "which is why we are going to find her before Beaumont does. And then we are going to destroy him so thoroughly that his name becomes a warning future generations use to frighten disobedient children. How do we find her?" James pulled maps from his desk, spread them across the table. "We think like someone running from a man with resources. Where would you go if you needed to disappear?" "Somewhere remote," Lucien said. "Away from cities where Beaumont has connections. Somewhere you could survive independently," James added. "Rural? Self-sufficient?" Lucien traced his finger across the map. "Northern Territories, the villages near my former holdings. She would know those areas from the business records I showed her. And she would assume you sold those holdings," James said. "That Beaumont would not think to look there. But Beaumont owns them now," Lucien realized, "through the shell corporations, which means he has access to property records and tenant lists." Silence descended as they both understood what that meant. Beaumont was not just hunting Seraphina randomly. He was systematically searching every property he had acquired through Lucien's liquidation. And Seraphina was hiding somewhere in that territory. "We leave tonight," Lucien said. James nodded, grabbed his coat, started gathering weapons from the cabinet where he kept them for situations that required more than legal solutions. Lucien watched his friend load pistols with the efficiency of someone who had done it before. "How did we get here?" "You fell in love with a woman smart enough to destroy you," James replied. "And now we are going to war to prove she was right about what kind of man you could become. And if we lose, then at least you died for something worth dying for." They rode north through rain that refused to stop, past industrial towns where smoke from factories blotted out stars, past villages where families huddled in cottages, hoping winter would end before they ran out of food to burn. This was the England Lucien had helped build, wealthy and brutal, efficient and merciless, a machine designed to extract maximum profit while grinding human lives into fuel for the gears. Looking at it from outside his empire made him sick. They reached the Northern Territories 2 days later. The landscape was exactly as Lucien remembered from his few visits. Rolling hills, stone walls dividing properties. Small villages clustered around churches that had stood for centuries. Somewhere in this wilderness, Seraphina was hiding, and somewhere behind them, Beaumont was hunting. They found the first sign in a village called Thornfield. A woman matching Seraphina's description had rented a cottage on the outskirts 3 weeks ago, paid 6 months in advance, kept to herself. The cottage stood alone on a hillside overlooking frozen farmland. Smoke rose from the chimney. Curtains were drawn against the cold. Lucien approached on foot, left James watching the road for signs of Beaumont's men. He knocked. No answer. Knocked again. The door opened slightly. Seraphina stood in the gap with a kitchen knife in her hand. When she saw him, something broke in her expression. Relief and terror mixing into something that looked like pain. "You should not be here," she said. "Neither should you," Lucien replied. "I told you not to look for me. I am not very good at following instructions. Seraphina's grip tightened on the knife. Beaumont is coming. He will kill anyone associated with me. Then we should probably stop standing in the doorway, making ourselves easy targets. She led him inside. The cottage was small, one room serving as kitchen and living space. A bedroom visible through a doorway. Simple furniture. No decoration. A place to survive, not live. How did you find me? Seraphina asked. I thought like someone running from a predator, Lucien said. You would choose somewhere remote, somewhere you could be self-sufficient, somewhere near my former holdings because you trusted the records I showed you. And Beaumont? Probably using the same logic, Lucien admitted, which means we do not have much time. Seraphina set down the knife, moved to the window, looked out at landscape that in better weather might have been beautiful. Why did you come? She asked quietly. Because you were right about everything, Lucien said. I was becoming a monster, confusing power with safety, building control to avoid vulnerability. You tested me to see if I could choose differently. And now? Now I am here. Empire sold, reputation destroyed, nothing left except the man underneath. Seraphina turned to face him. Her eyes held tears she refused to let fall. That man might get killed because of me. Then we die together, Lucien said. I would rather have one honest moment with you than a lifetime of safety alone. Before she could respond, James appeared in the doorway. We have company. 3 riders approaching from the south, armed. Beaumont, Lucien said. Time to go, James replied. They ran, out the back of the cottage, into the frozen hills where winter had stripped everything down to bare survival. Behind them, voices shouted, horses thundered. The hunt had begun, and Lucien Ashbourne, the man who spent 17 years building an empire to protect himself from powerlessness, discovered what it felt like to run for his life with nothing except the woman beside him, and the friend covering their escape. This was where theory became reality, where choosing vulnerability over control stopped being philosophical and became immediate survival. The question was whether the man he had become was strong enough to protect what mattered when the armor finally came off. The answer was about to be written in blood and ice across England's frozen northern territories. Running through frozen hills teaches you things about yourself that comfort never reveals. Your lungs burn. Your legs betray you. Every breath tastes like iron and regret. But you keep moving because stopping means dying, and dying means the people chasing you win. Lucien had never run from anything in his life. Until now. They crashed through underbrush that tore skin, stumbled over rocks hidden beneath snow. Seraphina beside him breathing hard, face pale, determination etched into every movement. James behind them firing pistol shots that were meant to slow pursuers rather than kill them. Not yet, anyway. The philosophy of violence is simple. You avoid it until avoidance becomes suicide. Then you embrace it completely or die pretending you are still civilized. Lucien had spent 17 years avoiding this moment, building empires, deploying wealth and influence as weapons that kept him distant from the brutal mathematics of survival. Power meant never having to fight with your hands, never having to run, never having to choose between killing someone or watching them kill what you loved. That distance had just collapsed into immediate reality. Behind them, horses crashed through the same underbrush. Beaumont's men were gaining. They knew this territory, knew the shortcuts, knew exactly where cornered prey would run when escape routes narrowed. We need to split up, James shouted over the sound of pursuit. No, Lucien replied. They will catch all of us if we stay together. Then they catch all of us. James grabbed his arm, forced him to stop. Listen to me. I can draw them off. Give you time to get Seraphina somewhere safe. And then what? Lucien demanded. They kill you while I hide? Better 1 dead than 3, James said. Do the math. Mathematics meant nothing when it involved watching your oldest friend sacrifice himself. Lucien had spent his entire adult life reducing human complexity to equations that served his purposes. Profit margins, strategic advantages, acceptable losses. Looking at James now, he understood why Seraphina had tested him so brutally. Because some things cannot be reduced to calculation without losing your humanity entirely. We stay together, Lucien repeated. Find another way. There is no other way, James said. You know it. I know it. Stop pretending sentiment changes reality. Seraphina stepped between them. Her breathing was ragged, face scratched from branches. But her eyes held the same steel that made her refuse every easy path her entire life. He is right, she said to Lucien. If we stay together, we all die. If James creates a diversion, you and I might survive." "I did not come all this way to watch people die for me," Lucien said. "Then you fundamentally misunderstand what love requires," Seraphina replied. "Sometimes it requires sacrifice. Sometimes it requires letting people choose their own deaths instead of forcing them to watch you die instead." The words landed like physical blows. Lucien looked between his oldest friend and the woman he had destroyed his empire to claim. Both of them willing to die. Both of them asking him to live. The choice was impossible. Accept James's sacrifice and live with the guilt. Refuse and watch everyone die anyway. There was no good option, only degrees of catastrophic loss. Behind them, the pursuit grew closer, shouts echoing across frozen hills. They had minutes, maybe less. James pulled a second pistol from his coat, handed it to Lucien. "Take her to the old church, 2 miles northeast. Stone building, defensible position. And you? I will lead them south. Make them think you are running toward the main road. By the time they realize the trick, you will be fortified." "They will kill you," Lucien said. "Probably," James agreed. "But I've lived 35 years and spent most of them watching you build walls that made you miserable. If dying gives you a chance to actually be happy, that seems like a reasonable trade." The simplicity of it was devastating. No grand speech, no dramatic declaration, just a friend willing to die so another friend could live differently. Lucien grabbed James, pulled him close. "This is not an acceptable outcome." "Life rarely offers acceptable outcomes," James replied. "It offers choices between bad and worse. You taught me that. I was wrong." "About many things," James agreed, "but not about this. Now go, while there is still time." He pushed Lucien toward Seraphina, then turned and ran south, firing his pistol, shouting loud enough to draw attention. The riders changed direction, followed the noise. Lucien stood frozen, every instinct screaming to help, to fight, to refuse the sacrifice being offered. Seraphina grabbed his hand. "We have to move. Now." She pulled him northeast, through trees that clawed at them, across frozen streams that cracked beneath their weight, every step taking them farther from James and closer to whatever temporary safety the church represented. Lucien's mind kept replaying the moment. James disappearing into the wilderness, drawing death away from them, choosing to die so others could live. The mathematics of it should have made sense. 1 life for 2, simple equation. But mathematics could not account for the hole tearing open in Lucien's chest. The realization that the only person who knew him before he became the Duke of Ravenmere was currently running toward his own execution, and Lucien was letting it happen. They reached the church as twilight devoured the last daylight. The building was exactly as James described, stone walls thick enough to stop bullets, heavy wooden doors that could be barred from inside, windows positioned high enough to defend from. A fortress built centuries ago when survival meant something different but equally brutal. Inside, the air smelled like dust and abandonment. Pews rotted in rows facing an altar where no one had prayed in decades. The building had outlived its purpose but refused to collapse. Lucien understood this feeling. Seraphina moved to the windows, checking sight lines, calculating approaches. She had learned strategy from watching him. Now she was deploying it to keep them alive. "How long until they realize James tricked them?" she asked. "An hour," Lucien said. "Maybe 2 if he leads them far enough south. And then? Then they come here, and we either hold them off or die trying." Seraphina turned from the window, looked at him directly. Those gray eyes held something that looked like understanding. "You wanted to go with him?" "Yes." "Why didn't you?" "Because you asked me not to," Lucien replied. "And I spent 17 years making decisions based on what served my interests. I am trying to learn what it feels like to make decisions based on what someone else needs, even if that decision feels like betrayal." "Especially then," Lucien said. "James chose his death. Refusing his choice would have been the real betrayal." The philosophy sounded reasonable, logical, the kind of argument aristocratic men made when justifying why other people had to die for their comfort. But it felt like swallowing glass. Seraphina crossed the space between them, stood close enough that he could see exhaustion etched into her face. She had been running for weeks, first from her mother, then from Lucien, now from Beaumont. All of it because she refused to be the weapon people kept trying to forge her into. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "For what?" "For testing you the way I did, for taking the board vote, for making you prove yourself when you were already trying to change. You were right to test me, Lucien replied. I needed to understand what powerlessness felt like. Needed to learn that vulnerability does not equal weakness. And now, Seraphina asked, knowing that choosing me led to this? James running toward death, Beaumont hunting us, everything you built gone. Now I know who I am without the armor, Lucien said, and he is someone I can actually live with, even if living only lasts another hour, especially then. They stood in the abandoned church while darkness gathered outside. Somewhere in the hills, James was leading men away from them, buying time with his life, giving them a chance to survive, or at least die together instead of separately. The weight of that sacrifice pressed down like physical force. Lucien had spent his entire adult life avoiding this kind of debt. Obligation made you vulnerable. Gratitude created weakness. Better to owe nothing, to stand alone, to be the man who crushed others rather than the man others died protecting. But standing in this church with Seraphina beside him, and James somewhere dying for them both, Lucien understood something fundamental. Isolation was not strength, it was cowardice disguised as independence. Real strength was accepting that you needed people, that love created obligations worth dying for, that vulnerability made you human instead of a machine calculating advantages. He had been so terrified of becoming his father that he became something worse, a man so armored against feeling that nothing could touch him, until Seraphina descended those stairs 4 years ago and made him remember what it felt like to want something beyond power. I love you, Lucien said. The words came out rough, unpracticed. He had never said them to anyone. Seraphina's eyes widened. You do not have to say that. I am not saying it because I have to, Lucien replied. I am saying it because we might die tonight, and I refuse to die without you knowing. Knowing what? That you were right about everything. That choosing you over the Empire was not weakness. That becoming someone worth your time required destroying the monster I built to survive. Tears gathered in Seraphina's eyes. Finally spilled over. I did not want you to destroy yourself. You did not destroy me, Lucien said. You saved me from destroying myself. There is a difference. He pulled her close, felt her body against his, warm and alive and trembling. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, they held each other like the world was ending, which it probably was. The riders arrived 2 hours after sunset. Lucien heard them before he saw them. Horses, voices, the unmistakable sound of men who had been tracking prey and finally cornered it. He moved to the window, counted 6 riders. No James, which meant either he was still leading them in circles or he was already dead and they had regrouped. Lucien knew which option was more likely. Seraphina stood beside him, pistol in hand, face set with determination that would have been beautiful if it was not so tragic. You know how to shoot that? Lucien asked. I am about to learn, she replied. Outside, a voice called out, refined, educated, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who attended the same schools as Lucien and learned the same lessons about power. Lord Beaumont had come personally. Duke Ashbourne, Beaumont shouted. I know you are in there. Send out Lady Seraphina and I will let you live. Lucien moved to the door, did not open it, shouted back through the wood. And if I refuse? Then I burn the church with both of you inside, Beaumont replied. Your choice. The woman who ruined both our plans, or a quick death for you both. The offer was tactical. Beaumont wanted Seraphina, probably to use as leverage, possibly to punish for refusing to participate in his scheme. Either way, handing her over meant watching her suffer. Refusing meant they both died. The mathematics were simple, but mathematics meant nothing anymore. She does not leave, Lucien called back. Silence. Then laughter, cold and genuinely amused. How romantic, Beaumont said. The great Duke of Ravenmere choosing love over survival. I almost wish I could watch you die together. But business requires efficiency. Footsteps retreated. Orders were given. Lucien smelled smoke within minutes. They were burning the church. Seraphina moved beside him. We need another option. There is no other option, Lucien said. We fight or we burn. Fighting means dying. Burning also means dying, Lucien replied. At least fighting gives us a chance. He barred the door, moved furniture to create defensive positions, checked the pistol James had given him. 1 shot, maybe 2 if he was lucky. Not nearly enough. Seraphina climbed to the choir loft. Better vantage point. She positioned herself near a window with sight lines covering the front approach. Below, Lucien watched smoke filter through cracks in the walls. The old wood was dry. It would burn fast. They had minutes, maybe less. "This is not how I imagined dying," Seraphina called down. "How did you imagine it?" Lucien asked. "Old," she replied. "In bed, surrounded by children who inherited my stubbornness and your complete inability to follow instructions. The image was beautiful, impossible. Everything they would never have because Beaumont wanted revenge and Lucien had destroyed his empire to prove he was different from the monster everyone feared." "I am sorry," Lucien said. "For what?" "For not being faster. For not seeing Beaumont's plan earlier. For not protecting you better." "You protected me the only way that mattered," Seraphina replied. "By choosing to become someone worth protecting." The smoke thickened. Lucien's eyes burned. His lungs protested. Outside, he heard Beaumont's men laughing, waiting for the fire to force them out. They would not wait long. Lucien moved to the altar, not to pray. He had stopped believing in divine intervention when his father died and left him alone. But because dying in this place felt symmetrical somehow, he built an empire to avoid powerlessness. Now he was dying powerless. He chose a woman over stability. Now he was dying with her. He became human instead of a monster. Now humanity was killing him. The irony should have been bitter. Instead, it felt almost peaceful. Above him, Seraphina coughed. The smoke was worse in the loft. She needed to come down, needed to be with him when the end came. Before he could call to her, the front doors exploded inward. Not from Beaumont's men, from something else. Someone else. James Cartwright crashed through burning wood. Blood covered his face. His coat was torn. He moved like someone running on pure spite and refused to collapse until the job was finished. Behind him came reinforcements, dozens of men. Workers from the factories Lucien used to own, miners from the coal operations, villagers from territories Beaumont had squeezed dry with price increases and wage cuts. They flooded the church, threw water on flames, created barriers between Lucien and the burning walls. Outside, chaos erupted. Beaumont's men were surrounded, outnumbered 20-1 by people who had been quietly organizing while aristocrats played their games. James collapsed against a pew. Lucien rushed to him. Blood poured from a wound in his side. Too much blood. "You are supposed to be dead," Lucien said. "I got bored," James replied. His voice was weak, fading. "So I decided to come back and ruin your dramatic sacrifice." "How?" "Told the truth," James said. "Rode to every village, every factory. Explained that Beaumont had stolen their livelihoods through legal theft disguised as business. Explained that you sold your empire trying to become someone better. And they believed you?" "They believed their own suffering," James said. "I just gave them a target for their rage." Outside, the sounds of fighting grew distant. Beaumont's men were retreating, overwhelmed by workers who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain from burning down the aristocrats who kept them powerless. It was revolution in miniature, localized, spontaneous, the kind of uprising that kept wealthy men awake at night. And it was saving Lucien's life. James grabbed his hand. His grip was weak. "You need to promise me something." "Anything," Lucien said. "Do not waste this." James coughed. Blood flecked his lips. "You got a second chance to be someone worth being. Do not turn back into the monster." "I promise, Lucien." Lucien said. "Good." James's eyes closed. "About time you learned that power means nothing if you die alone." He went still. Lucien held his hand, felt life leave the only person who knew him before he became the Duke of Ravenmere. Around them, men extinguished flames, secured the building, created safety from chaos through collective action, but James would not see it. Seraphina climbed down from the loft, knelt beside Lucien, put her hand on his shoulder. "I am sorry," she said. "He died so we could live," Lucien replied. "The least we can do is make that sacrifice mean something." The aftermath of violence is never clean. There are bodies, questions, legal complications that stretch for months. Beaumont disappeared during the chaos, fled back to London or possibly the continent. His men scattered. The coalition he built collapsed once workers realized they could organize against exploitation. Lucien spent 3 months in northern territories helping rebuild what Beaumont had broken. Not as a duke, not as an industrial magnate, as someone who owed a debt to people who saved his life. He used the wealth from his liquidation to establish workers' cooperatives, transferred factory ownership to the laborers who actually operated the machinery, created schools in villages that had never seen education as anything except a luxury for aristocrats. It was not charity, it was restitution. For 17 years, he had extracted profit from human suffering while telling himself it was necessary. Efficient, the brutal mathematics of industrial progress. Now he was learning what progress actually looked like when measured by human dignity instead of profit margins. Seraphina worked beside him, not as his assistant, as his partner. She established lending programs for women, created apprenticeship systems that taught trades beyond domestic service, gave people tools to escape poverty rather than platitudes about hard work. Together, they rebuilt what empire had destroyed. The work was exhausting, frustrating, progress measured in inches rather than miles. But it felt real in ways that signing contracts and crushing competitors never had. On the first anniversary of James's death, Lucien stood at his grave in a small cemetery overlooking the valley where they had fought. The stone was simple, no grand monument, just his name and the dates that bracketed a life well lived. Seraphina stood beside him. She had stopped running, stopped testing, stopped waiting for him to revert to the monster he used to be. He told me once that real strength was knowing when to stop fighting, Lucien said. I did not understand what he meant until he died proving it. What do you think he meant? Seraphina asked. That some battles are worth losing if losing them makes you someone worth being. They stood in silence. Wind moved through trees. Below, the village they had helped rebuild went about its evening routines. Smoke rose from chimneys. Children played in streets. Life continued despite everything that tried to stop it. Eventually, Seraphina took his hand. Are you ready to go home? Home was a cottage they built together. Small, practical. Nothing like Ashbourne House with its mahogany and imported chandeliers. But it was theirs, built by their choices rather than inherited expectations. Yes, Lucien said. They walked down the hillside together, past fields coming back to life, past families who nodded greetings instead of bowing, past a world that was slowly learning that change was possible when people chose solidarity over submission. That night, sitting beside a fire that crackled in their modest hearth, Seraphina asked the question Lucien had been waiting for. Do you regret it? Giving up everything? Every day? Lucien replied honestly. I wake up and remember what it felt like to have power, to enter rooms and watch men scramble, to never worry about money or influence or whether people would listen. And then I remember what I had to become to maintain that power, Lucien continued, the cruelty I justified, the suffering I ignored, the isolation that came from treating everyone like potential threats. So you do not regret it? I regret that it took me 17 years to learn what James tried to teach me at 15, Lucien said. That power without purpose is just organized violence. That wealth without compassion is just hoarded resources. That being feared is not the same as being respected. Seraphina moved closer, rested her head against his shoulder. I am proud of you. The words hit harder than any business victory, any parliamentary triumph, any aristocratic acknowledgement he had received in his former life, because they came from someone who had tested him brutally and decided he was worth keeping. Why? Lucien asked. Because you chose to break instead of becoming brittle, Seraphina said. Most powerful men defend their empires until death. You dismantled yours to discover if the man underneath was worth saving. And? Was he? Seraphina looked up at him. Those storm-gray eyes held everything that mattered. You are here, building schools for children whose parents you once exploited, creating opportunities for people you used to view as resources, learning what it means to be human instead of a machine calculating advantages. That is not an answer, Lucien said. Yes, it is, Seraphina replied. You are becoming the man I hoped you could be when I first saw you at that ball, the one hiding underneath the monster society created. Lucien pulled her closer. Outside, winter settled over northern territories. Inside, they held each other like survivors of a war that nearly destroyed them both, which it had. The difference was they survived, not unbroken, not unchanged, but alive and human and willing to build something better from the ashes. Years later, when people asked about the Duke of Ravenmere who sold his empire and disappeared, Lucien never corrected their assumptions. Let them think he had died, or fled to the continent. or collapsed into madness. The truth was simpler and more complicated. He learned that real power was not control over others. It was control over yourself. The discipline to choose vulnerability when armor felt safer. The courage to admit you were wrong when defending yourself felt easier. The willingness to rebuild yourself when breaking felt permanent. He learned that love was not possession. It was partnership with someone strong enough to test you, and patient enough to wait while you became someone worth their time. He learned that legacy was not measured by wealth accumulated or enemies crushed. It was measured by the lives you improved and the systems you changed, and the example you set for people trying to survive in a world designed to crush them. Most importantly, he learned that becoming human again after years of being a monster required more strength than building empires ever did. Because empires were built from strategy and ruthlessness and calculated violence. Humanity was built from honesty and vulnerability, and the terrifying admission that you needed other people. On quiet evenings, Lucien would stand at the window of their cottage watching the village below. Children played in streets they made safer. Families gathered in homes they could actually afford. People lived with dignity because he chose to dismantle the systems that made him wealthy. Seraphina would join him, stand beside him, take his hand. "What are you thinking?" she would ask. "That kingdoms are easier to conquer than the human heart," Lucien would reply. And she would smile, knowing, understanding exactly what he meant, because she had conquered his heart by refusing to accept the kingdom he offered. And in doing so, she gave him something infinitely more valuable, the chance to become someone worth being conquered by. Outside, snow fell across northern territories. Inside, beside the woman who destroyed his empire and saved his humanity, Lucien Ashbourne finally understood what James had been trying to teach him. That real strength was not about never falling. It was about who you chose to become after you hit the ground, and whether you had the courage to stay human when becoming a monster felt safer. He chose humanity, every day, in every decision, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard, because Seraphina was right about one final thing. Power was temporary. Empires collapsed. Wealth vanished. But the person you became through choosing love over control, vulnerability over armor, and humanity over dominance, that was the only legacy that actually mattered. And it was the only thing death could not take away.